Well, well, well. What charity case did they send us now? Robert Crane was staring directly at a young black woman in a wheelchair who had just entered for her first day as an intern. The words hit her like ice water as every head in the conference room turned. What happened next would be 2 weeks of systematic torture disguised as an internship. Mail sorting in basements. Impossible assignments designed to humiliate. Public degradation that made colleagues look away in shame. But Robert Crane had made one fatal assumption about the intern he was destroying, because what happened next didn't just end Robert's career. It rewrote the rules of corporate justice forever. Sometimes the people you underestimate the most are connected to forces you never see coming. Hello, my beautiful family. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. The elevator in Foster Technologies hummed quietly as it carried Kenneth Foster to the 42nd floor of his empire. Outside the glass walls of downtown Denver, the Rocky Mountains stood like silent guardians under the crisp autumn sky. Kenneth adjusted his navy wool sweater, no tie, no designer labels, just a man who preferred comfort over flash. His warm brown eyes held the weight of someone who'd built something extraordinary from nothing. His assistant knocked softly on the office door. "Mr. Foster, your daughter called. She starts her internship today." Kenneth's face softened. Diane, his brilliant girl who refused his offers to work at Foster Technologies, determined to prove herself elsewhere. She'd graduated summa cum laude from MIT with a computer science degree, her mind sharp enough to revolutionize any company lucky enough to get her. The fact that she used a wheelchair after a car accident during her sophomore year had only strengthened her resolve. "She'll be fine," he murmured, though worry tugged at his chest. He'd kept his wealth deliberately quiet, maintaining separate lives to protect his children from fortune hunters and those who might exploit them. Diane knew about the money, but she'd insisted on using her mother's maiden name, Foster, for her career. She wanted to succeed on her own merit. Kenneth pulled up the stock reports on his computer. Foster Technologies owned significant shares in dozens of companies across Colorado and beyond. His investment portfolio read like a who's who of American business. But none of that mattered if his daughter wasn't happy. 20 miles across the city, Diane Foster wheeled herself through the revolving door of Crane Dynamics, one of Denver's most successful software development firms. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble lobby as she approached the reception desk. Her bright yellow blazer stood out against her dark skin, and her natural hair was styled in neat locks that framed her determined face. "Good morning. I'm Diane Foster, the new intern starting today." The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly straightened blonde hair, looked down at her with barely concealed confusion. "Oh, let me call someone." Diane waited, her hands folded in her lap. She'd faced these moments before, the pause, the awkward stare, the assumption that she didn't belong. But she belonged here. Her coding skills had impressed 3 different professors, and her innovative approach to user interface design had already caught the attention of several tech blogs. The elevator dinged, and Tyler Brooks emerged, a lanky developer with kind eyes and coffee-stained fingers. "You must be Diane. I'm Tyler. Welcome to Crane Dynamics." As they rode up to the 15th floor, Tyler chatted nervously about company culture and office layout. "Just so you know, Mr. Crane can be intense. He's brilliant, don't get me wrong, but he has strong opinions about how things should run." "I can handle intense," Diane replied, her voice steady. The elevator opened to reveal a modern office space with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting. Developers hunched over multiple monitors while project managers scurried between departments. It felt alive, productive. Diane smiled. "There's your workstation," Tyler pointed to a desk near the back. "I made sure it's height adjustable and accessible. The bathroom down the hall has." "Thank you." Diane's tone was warm but firm. She appreciated his thoughtfulness without making it a big production. As she unpacked her laptop and personal items, Diane noticed the other employees stealing glances. Some looked curious, others sympathetic. A few seemed uncomfortable, as if they weren't sure how to act around her. She'd learned to read these reactions years ago. Carmen Lopez, a marketing manager with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense attitude, stopped by her desk. Need anything? Coffee. Tour of the building. Coffee sounds perfect. In the break room, Carmen lowered her voice. Word of advice. Stay under the radar today. Crane's in one of his moods. Big client meeting went sideways over the weekend. Before Diane could respond, the unmistakable sound of expensive leather shoes clicked across the hardwood floor. Robert Crane entered the break room like he owned not just the building but the air inside it. His steel-gray hair was perfectly styled, and his charcoal suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Cold blue eyes swept the room before landing on Diane. And who might you be? Diane Foster, sir. The new intern. Robert's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. His gaze moved from her face to her wheelchair, then back up again. Something calculated flickered behind his eyes. Intern. He said the word like it tasted bitter. Human resources really outdid themselves this time. What's your background, Miss Foster? Computer science from MIT. I specialize in user interface design and accessibility programming. MIT. Robert's smile held no warmth. How progressive of them. Well, we'll see what you can actually do here in the real world. The room fell silent. Carmen's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. Tyler appeared in the doorway, sensing the tension but afraid to intervene. I'm ready to contribute however I can, Diane said evenly. Oh, I'm sure you are. Robert's tone dripped with condescension. Tyler, why don't you show Miss Foster to the filing room? I'm sure she can handle organizing some paperwork. We wouldn't want to overwhelm her on the first day. Tyler's face flushed red. Actually, sir, I was going to have her work on the Morrison account interface. Her portfolio shows some really innovative. The filing room, Tyler. Robert's voice cut like ice. I'm sure Miss Foster understands the importance of starting at the bottom and working up. Assuming she's capable of working up. Diane felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. I understand perfectly. As Robert left the break room, his phone buzzed. Crane speaking. What do you mean the Foster Technologies deal fell through? I thought we had that locked down. His voice faded as he disappeared down the hallway. Carmen placed a gentle hand on Diane's shoulder. Don't let him get to you. He's like that with everyone. But Diane knew better. She'd seen that look before. The assessment, the dismissal, the calculation that she was somehow less than. The fact that her last name was Foster hadn't even registered with him. If it had, he might have connected the dots to Foster Technologies, the company whose partnership he'd apparently just lost. As she wheeled toward the filing room, Diane pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to her best friend Rebecca. First day is interesting. Call you tonight. She didn't text her father. Not yet. Kenneth had taught her to fight her own battles first, to be strong and independent. But if Robert Crane thought he could break her spirit with filing duty and condescending remarks, he was about to learn just how wrong he could be. The filing room was a windowless space filled with metal cabinets and banker's boxes. Diane looked around at the chaos of disorganized documents and smiled grimly. If Robert wanted her to start at the bottom, she'd start at the bottom. But she'd do it so well that he'd have no choice but to notice. Meanwhile, 3 floors up in his corner office, Robert stood at his window overlooking downtown Denver. His reflection stared back at him, successful, powerful, untouchable. The Foster Technologies deal had been a setback, but there would be other deals. There always were. His assistant knocked. Sir, the quarterly reports are ready for review. Good. And Beverly? Make sure our new intern stays busy with appropriate tasks. I don't want her getting ideas above her station. Of course, Mr. Crane. As Beverly Walsh left his office, Robert returned to his window. He'd built Crane Dynamics from a small startup into a multi-million-dollar corporation through careful calculation and strategic ruthlessness. He knew how to read people, how to identify threats and eliminate them before they became problems. The girl in the wheelchair wasn't a threat. She was an annoyance, probably some diversity hire forced on him by legal requirements. But annoyances had a way of becoming problems if you didn't handle them properly. Robert pulled up the employee files on his computer and found Diane's resume. MIT graduate, impressive GPA, glowing recommendations. On paper, she looked qualified. But Robert had learned not to trust paper. Real capability showed itself in the real world, under real pressure. He made a mental note to keep her under observation. If she proved useful, fine. If not, well, internships were temporary by nature. Down in the filing room, Diane had already reorganized 2 entire cabinets and created a digital inventory system on her laptop. The work was beneath her skill level, but she approached it with the same precision she'd brought to her graduate thesis. As she worked, her mind wandered to her father. Kenneth Foster had built his empire through patience, intelligence, and an unwavering belief in treating people with dignity. He taught her that true power came not from tearing others down, but from lifting them up. Sometimes the people who try to make you feel small, he told her once, are the ones who are smallest inside. Diane finished organizing another box of contracts and invoices. At the bottom, she found a folder marked Foster Technologies Partnership Proposal. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it. The documents detailed Robert's failed attempt to secure a partnership with her father's company. The proposal was poorly written, full of assumptions about Foster Technologies' structure and goals. No wonder it had been rejected. For a moment, Diane considered calling her father immediately. One phone call could end Robert's condescending treatment instantly. But that wasn't who she was. She'd earned her place at MIT through hard work, not family connections. She'd earn her respect here the same way. Still, as she filed the Foster Technologies folder in its proper place, Diane couldn't help but smile. Robert Crane had no idea who he was dealing with. And if he continued down this path of disrespect and discrimination, he was going to find out just how dangerous it was to underestimate a Foster. The afternoon sun slanted through the office windows as employees returned from lunch. In a few hours, Diane would call her father for their daily check-in. She hoped she'd have good news to share. But somehow, looking at the man who dismissed her so easily, she suspected this was only the beginning. The morning air in downtown Denver carried the crisp promise of autumn as Diane arrived at Crane Dynamics for her second day. She'd spent the previous evening on a video call with her father, carefully editing out Robert's condescending behavior. Kenneth had enough worries running his empire without fretting over her workplace dynamics. "How's the new position treating you?" he'd asked, his warm eyes crinkling with concern through the screen. "It's challenging," she'd replied truthfully. "But I'm learning." Now, wheeling through the lobby at 7:45 a.m., Diane felt determined to prove herself through excellence. Her bright coral sweater complemented her dark skin, and she'd chosen her favorite silver earrings for confidence. The security guard nodded respectfully as she passed. In the elevator, she reviewed her plan. Today she would finish the filing project and request assignment to actual development work. Her MIT training hadn't prepared her for organizing dusty contracts, but she'd transformed that chaotic filing room into a model of efficiency. The elevator dinged on the 15th floor, and Diane wheeled toward her assigned workspace. The office buzzed with Tuesday morning energy. Developers clustered around whiteboards covered in code snippets while project managers juggled phone calls and coffee cups. "Morning, Diane." Tyler appeared beside her desk, laptop tucked under his arm. "Ready for day 2? "Absolutely. I finished reorganizing the filing room yesterday. Created a digital inventory system, too. Maybe now I can work on some actual programming." Tyler's expression shifted uncomfortably. "About that. Mr. Crane left specific instructions. He wants you to handle all the mail sorting and delivery today." Apparently, the usual mail clerk called in sick. Diane felt her stomach drop. Mail delivery meant wheeling around the entire building, a task designed to showcase her disability to every employee. But she kept her voice steady. "Of course. Where do I start?" Before Tyler could answer, Robert's voice boomed across the office. "Tyler, conference room. Now." As Tyler hurried away, Diane made her way to the mailroom. Mountains of letters, packages, and internal documents waited on the sorting table. She began organizing by department and floor, her movements efficient despite the deliberate humiliation of the assignment. Carmen Lopez found her there 20 minutes later. "This is ridiculous. You're overqualified for male duty." "It's fine," Diane replied, though her jaw was tight. "Everyone starts somewhere." "Not like this, they don't." Carmen's voice carried years of corporate frustration. "I've seen 12 interns come through here. None of them sorted mail." As Diane loaded the first batch of deliveries into a canvas bag across her lap, she noticed several employees watching from their desks. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed embarrassed for her. A few appeared relieved that someone else was bearing the brunt of Robert's attention. Her first stop was the accounting department on the 12th floor. As the elevator doors opened, conversations stopped. Diane wheeled past cubicles filled with spreadsheets and calculators, delivering mail with professional grace. By the third department, word had spread. The new intern was doing mail rounds. "Excuse me." An older accountant with kind eyes approached her. "I'm Patricia Coleman. I just wanted to say welcome to the company." "Thank you. I'm Diane Foster. If you ever need anything, my office is always open." These small kindnesses kept Diane's spirit afloat as she continued her rounds. But when she reached the executive floor, the atmosphere changed. Robert's assistant, Beverly Walsh, looked up from her desk with obvious discomfort. "Just leave the mail here," Beverly whispered, glancing nervously toward Robert's office. Through the open door, Diane could see Robert on a phone call, his back to the doorway. His voice carried clearly into the reception area. "I don't care what their diversity requirements are, Frank. We're not lowering our standards to accommodate every bleeding heart cause that walks through our doors." Diane's hands stilled on the mailbag. Beverly's face flushed red. "Some of these people think they're entitled to special treatment just because of their circumstances," Robert continued. "But this is the real world. Results matter, not sob stories." The words hit Diane like physical blows. She'd heard similar sentiments before, but never so blatantly expressed about her specifically. Her breathing became shallow. Robert's voice grew louder. "Mark my words, Frank. Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Next thing you know, we'll be redesigning our entire office for the convenience of people who can't even do the job properly." Beverly stood abruptly. "Mr. Crane, your 10 a.m. appointment is here." The phone conversation ended. Robert emerged from his office, straightening his expensive tie. His cold blue eyes landed on Diane with unmistakable satisfaction. "Ah, Miss Foster. How are you finding your new responsibilities? Not too challenging, I hope." Diane met his gaze directly. "I'm managing just fine, thank you." "Excellent. Beverly, make sure Miss Foster understands that punctuality is essential in mail delivery. Our employees depend on timely communication." His smile was razor-sharp. "We wouldn't want anyone to think we're making allowances for slower service." The insult hung in the air like poison gas. Beverly's face had turned pale. Down the hallway, Frank Morrison emerged from the conference room and witnessed the exchange. His expression showed genuine shock. "Of course, sir," Beverly whispered. Robert returned to his office, leaving Diane alone with Beverly and Frank. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "I should finish my rounds," Diane said quietly. As she wheeled toward the elevator, Frank stepped forward. "Miss Foster? I'm Frank Morrison, Business Development. I wanted to apologize for what you just heard. That was completely inappropriate." Diane paused. Frank appeared to be in his late 30s, with honest brown eyes and a rumpled suit that suggested he cared more about substance than style. His words seemed genuine. "Thank you," she replied. "But I can handle it." "I'm sure you can. Still, if you ever need someone to listen." Frank handed her his business card. "What happened up here isn't reflective of everyone at this company." Back in the elevator, Diane's composure finally cracked. Her hands trembled as she pressed the button for the 15th floor. The humiliation burned in her chest, but beneath it, something else was building. Anger. Cold, focused anger. She completed her mail rounds mechanically, delivering the remaining items with robotic efficiency. Other employees offered smiles and small talk, but their kindness felt distant now. Robert's words echoed in her mind. People who can't even do the job properly. By lunchtime, Diane had retreated to a quiet corner of the building's cafeteria. She picked at her salad while scrolling through her phone, trying to distract herself from the morning's events. A text from Rebecca appeared. "How's day 2 going?" "Better than yesterday." Diane stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Learning a lot about corporate culture." Good or bad learning? Educational. As she ate, Diane noticed several Crane Dynamics employees at nearby tables. Their conversation seemed normal, professional. These were good people doing honest work. Robert's toxicity hadn't infected everyone. The afternoon brought more mail duties and additional humiliations. Robert assigned her to clean out old storage closets, tasks that required extensive reaching and stretching that he knew would be difficult from a wheelchair. Each assignment felt calculated to emphasize her disability while providing him plausible deniability. By 4 p.m., Tyler could no longer stay silent. He approached Diane as she reorganized a supply closet that hadn't been touched in months. "This is wrong," he said quietly. "You should be working on development projects, not janitorial duties." "It's temporary," Diane replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "No, it's not. This is deliberate." Tyler's youthful face was flushed with indignation. "Crane's trying to break you down. Make you quit." Diane stopped sorting supplies and looked directly at Tyler. "Why?" "Because you threaten him. Your resume is better than half the senior developers here. Your ideas are innovative. And you're—" Tyler struggled for words. "Different. Not white. Not male. Not walking." He sees all of that as weakness, but really he's terrified of your strength. That evening, Diane sat in her accessible apartment overlooking downtown Denver. The city lights twinkled below as she processed the day's events. Her laptop was open to a half-finished email to her father, but she couldn't find the right words. How could she explain that the promising internship had become a masterclass in workplace discrimination? How could she tell Kenneth that his brilliant daughter was being treated like a charity case by a man too ignorant to recognize her worth? Her phone rang. Kenneth's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Dad." "Hello, sweetheart. How was day 2? Diane closed her eyes. "Challenging." Good challenging or difficult challenging? The question hung between them. Kenneth had always been able to read her moods, even through phone calls. His success in business came partly from his ability to understand people, to hear what they weren't saying. "Both," Diane admitted. "Want to talk about it?" For a moment, Diane considered telling him everything. About Robert's cruelty, the mail duties, the overheard conversation. One phone call from Kenneth Foster could end this nightmare instantly. Robert would grovel and apologize and suddenly discover her remarkable qualifications. But that wasn't who she wanted to be. She'd fought too hard for independence to hide behind her father's wealth now. "I can handle it, Dad. Just workplace politics." "If you're sure." Kenneth's tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Remember, honey, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're already extraordinary." After hanging up, Diane stared at her reflection in the dark window. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Halfway through her first week. She could endure Robert's petty cruelties and calculated humiliations. She could rise above his ignorance and prejudice. But as she prepared for bed, Diane made herself a promise. Robert Crane thought he could break her spirit with filing duties and storage closet assignments. He thought her wheelchair made her weak, her skin color made her inferior, her gender made her disposable. He was about to learn just how wrong one man could be. In his penthouse across town, Robert poured himself a glass of 20-year-old scotch and reviewed the day's victories. The foster girl was learning her place. By Friday, she'd either quit in frustration or settle into the menial role he'd carved out for her. Either outcome worked perfectly for him. What Robert didn't know was that his casual cruelty had been witnessed by more people than he realized. Frank Morrison had spent the afternoon making quiet phone calls. Beverly Walsh had updated her resume. Tyler Brooks had started documenting incidents in a private file. And somewhere in the city, Kenneth Foster was staring at his phone, troubled by the forced cheerfulness in his daughter's voice. The wheels of justice moved slowly sometimes, but they were beginning to turn. On day 3, Robert Crane arrived at his office that morning with the satisfaction of a man who believed he was winning. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the marble lobby floor as he strode past the security desk, ignoring the respectful nods from staff. The previous day had gone exactly as planned. The Foster girl was learning her place in his carefully ordered world. In the elevator to his penthouse office, Robert reviewed his strategy. Break down the weak ones early, establish dominance, maintain control. It was a formula that had served him well for 15 years of corporate leadership. The girl's disability made her an easy target, and her race provided additional leverage in his psychological warfare. By Friday, she would either quit or become so demoralized that she would pose no threat to his authority. His assistant, Beverly, greeted him with coffee and a stack of morning reports. "Good morning, Mr. Crane. Your 9 a.m. with the Patterson Group has been moved to 10:30. Fine. Where's our intern this morning?" Beverly's hands trembled slightly as she organized his schedule. "I believe she's in the mailroom again, sir." "Excellent. Make sure she understands that accuracy is paramount. We can't have important documents going to the wrong departments because of careless mistakes." His smile was predatory. Some people need extra supervision to maintain professional standards. 20 floors below, Diane sat in the mailroom surrounded by towers of correspondence. She'd arrived 30 minutes early, determined to complete her assigned tasks with flawless efficiency. Every envelope was sorted with precision, every package logged with meticulous care. If Robert wanted to judge her performance, he would find no fault in her work. But beneath her professional composure, something was hardening. She told herself the humiliation was temporary, that enduring his petty cruelties would ultimately prove her strength. This was just another test, like the accessibility barriers she'd faced at MIT or the skeptical professors who'd questioned her capabilities. "Morning, Diane." Tyler appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need caffeine fuel." "Thank you." She accepted the cup gratefully. "Any word on when I might start actual development work?" Tyler's expression darkened. "I asked Crane about it yesterday. He said you needed to demonstrate reliability in basic tasks first." "How long does demonstrating reliability typically take?" "For other interns?" "About 2 days." Tyler's voice carried barely controlled anger. "But I think he's playing by different rules with you." Diane forced herself to stay calm. "Then I'll play by his rules until he runs out of excuses." As Tyler left for his morning meetings, Diane wheeled the mail cart toward the elevator. Today's route would take her through every department again, ensuring maximum visibility for her reduced status. But she refused to show shame or defeat. Her back was straight, her head high, her movements confident. On the 7th floor, she encountered Frank Morrison coming out of a client meeting. His face showed genuine concern when he saw her. "Miss Foster, do you have a moment?" Diane paused her deliveries. "Of course." Frank glanced around to ensure privacy, then spoke quietly. "I made some calls yesterday. About what happened on the executive floor." "That's not necessary, Mr. Morrison." "Yes, it is." Frank's brown eyes were intense. "I've worked in corporate environments for 12 years. What Crane is doing to you isn't normal workplace hazing. It's targeted harassment." Diane felt her carefully constructed emotional walls begin to crack. "I can handle it." "You shouldn't have to handle it. This is discrimination, plain and simple." Frank pulled out his phone. "I'm documenting everything I witness. If you decide to file a complaint, you'll have corroboration." "I'm not filing any complaints." The words came out sharper than Diane intended. "I'm here to work, not create problems." Frank studied her face. "Sometimes the problem creates itself. You're just the person it chose to reveal itself through." As Diane continued her rounds, Frank's words echoed in her mind. She'd spent years proving she belonged in academic and professional spaces, fighting the assumption that her wheelchair made her less capable. The idea of being seen as a victim or troublemaker felt worse than enduring Robert's abuse. Meanwhile, 3 floors up, Robert was having his own conversation about the situation. His business partner Frank Morrison had requested an impromptu meeting, arriving with an expression Robert hadn't seen before. "We need to talk about the new intern," Frank said without preamble. Robert leaned back in his leather chair. "What about her?" "What you're doing is wrong, Robert. And it's dangerous." "I'm not doing anything except maintaining professional standards." Robert's voice carried the smooth confidence of practiced denial. If she can't handle basic workplace expectations, perhaps she's not suited for this environment. Mail sorting? Storage closet organization? Those aren't workplace expectations for MIT graduates. Robert's eyes narrowed. "She's an intern, Frank. Interns do whatever needs doing. That's how they learn the business from the ground up." "That's bullshit, and you know it." Frank's usually calm demeanor cracked. "I've seen you assign actual development work to interns on their first day. White male interns." "I don't like your implication." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it directly. You're discriminating against that girl because she's black and disabled, and if you keep it up, you're going to destroy this company." Robert stood abruptly, his 6-foot frame towering over Frank's desk. "This is my company, Frank. I built it from nothing, and I'll run it however I see fit. If you don't like my management style, you're welcome to find another partnership." The threat hung between them like a blade. Frank had invested 8 years and significant capital into Crane Dynamics. Walking away would cost him everything he'd worked for. But staying silent felt like complicity in something increasingly ugly. "Just think about what you're doing," Frank said finally. "That girl hasn't done anything to deserve your hostility." After Frank left, Robert poured himself a glass of water and stared out his window at downtown Denver. Frank's accusations were ridiculous. He wasn't discriminating against anyone. He was simply maintaining the high standards that had made Crane Dynamics successful. Some people were cut out for competitive business environments, and others weren't. It wasn't his fault if certain individuals couldn't handle the pressure. The foster girl would either adapt or leave. Either outcome served his purposes. Down in the cafeteria, Diane sat alone with her lunch, reviewing emails on her phone. Several messages from MIT classmates asked about her new position. She crafted carefully neutral responses that avoided mentioning the reality of her assignments. "Mind if I join you?" Carmen Lopez appeared with a salad and a determined expression. "Please, sit." Carmen studied Diane's face as she settled into the opposite chair. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine." "No, you're not. Nobody would be fine in your situation." Carmen's voice carried the authority of someone who'd navigated corporate politics for decades. "I've watched Crane operate for 5 years. What he's doing to you is calculated and cruel." Diane set down her sandwich. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone needs to." Carmen leaned forward. "I've seen him target other employees before. People who threatened his sense of control. But never this blatantly. What happened to them?" "Most quit. A few fought back and got fired for unrelated reasons. One filed a harassment complaint and suddenly found himself blacklisted from every major firm in Denver." The information hit Diane like cold water. "Are you trying to scare me?" "I'm trying to prepare you. Crane doesn't back down. He escalates until he gets what he wants." Carmen's expression was grim. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" That afternoon, Diane found herself assigned to cleaning out the basement storage area, a task that required navigating poorly lit spaces and reaching high shelves that were clearly inaccessible from her wheelchair. The assignment was so obviously designed to highlight her disability that even Robert's usual veneer of plausible deniability had worn thin. She called Tyler for assistance with the higher shelves, trying to maintain professional dignity while performing janitorial work that had nothing to do with software development. As they worked together in the dusty basement, Tyler's frustration finally boiled over. "This is insane. You have a computer science degree from MIT. You should be leading project teams, not reorganizing storage closets." "It's temporary," Diane repeated, though the words felt increasingly hollow. When? When does it become not temporary? Tyler's young face was flushed with indignation. When does Robert Crane suddenly discover your qualifications and apologize for wasting your talents? Diane had no answer. She'd been telling herself the same story for 3 days, believing that excellence and perseverance would eventually overcome prejudice. But Carmen's warnings echoed in her mind. What if Robert never intended to give her real work? What if the entire internship was designed to humiliate her into quitting? As they finished organizing the storage area, Diane made a decision that surprised herself. Tyler, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I want you to document everything. Every assignment, every conversation, every incident. Can you do that quietly? Tyler's eyes widened. You're going to fight back? I'm going to be prepared. Diane's voice carried new steel. If this gets worse, I want evidence. That evening, Diane sat in her apartment staring at her phone. Kenneth's contact information glowed on the screen, along with a dozen missed calls from Rebecca and her college friends. They sensed something was wrong, but she'd been deflecting their concerns with vague reassurances. She could call her father. One conversation would end this nightmare. Kenneth Foster's influence could crush Robert Crane's petty empire before the weekend. But using her family's wealth felt like admitting defeat, like confirming every assumption about her inability to succeed independently. Instead, she opened her laptop and began researching Colorado employment law. If Robert wanted to play games with her career, she would learn the rules better than he knew them himself. She would document every violation, every discriminatory act, every illegal assignment. But even as she researched legal precedents and harassment statutes, a part of Diane hoped it wouldn't come to that. She still believed that competence and character would eventually triumph over prejudice. She still wanted to prove herself through excellence rather than litigation. Across town, Robert was having dinner with potential investors, regaling them with stories of his business acumen and strategic vision. The Foster girl hadn't crossed his mind once during the evening. She was a minor irritation, easily managed and soon forgotten. He had no idea that his casual cruelty had already set forces in motion that would soon spiral beyond his control. Frank Morrison was making more phone calls. Tyler Brooks was creating detailed files. Carmen Lopez was reaching out to contacts in human resources advocacy groups. And in her quiet apartment, Diane Foster was learning that sometimes the most dangerous opponent was the one who refused to stay down. The resistance phase was ending. Soon, circumstances would force them all into closer proximity, and the real battle would begin. The emergency all-hands meeting was called at 3:47 p.m. on day 4, just as most employees were settling into their afternoon routines. Beverly Walsh's voice crackled through the intercom system with barely controlled panic. All department heads and senior staff to conference room A immediately. All other employees remain at your workstations until further notice. Diane looked up from her latest assignment, organizing old client files in a cramped storage room that Robert had designated as her project space. Through the small window, she could see people hurrying toward the main conference room with worried expressions. Tyler appeared in her doorway, face flushed from running. Something big is happening. The Patterson Group just pulled their contract. That's $12 million gone. Why? Nobody knows yet. But Crane's called an emergency meeting. Tyler paused. He specifically asked for you to be there. Diane's stomach clenched. In 4 days, Robert had never included her in anything resembling actual business. If he wanted her in this meeting, it meant something had gone very wrong, and somehow she was connected to it. The conference room buzzed with nervous energy as employees filed in. Robert stood at the head of the table, his usual composed demeanor cracked around the edges. His expensive suit looked rumpled, and his silver hair was disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. Frank Morrison sat near the middle of the table, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes alert. Carmen Lopez occupied a chair near the back, taking notes on her tablet. Beverly Walsh hovered near the door, wringing her hands like a nervous bird. Diane wheeled herself to an empty space at the table's far end, acutely aware that every eye in the room tracked her movement. She could feel the weight of speculation and curiosity from her colleagues. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert began, his voice tight with controlled fury, "we've just suffered a significant setback. The Patterson Group has terminated their contract, effective immediately." Murmurs rippled through the room. The Patterson deal represented one of Crane Dynamics' largest accounts, a project that had taken months to secure and was supposed to carry the company through the next fiscal year. "What's their stated reason?" Frank asked. Robert's jaw twitched. "They cited concerns about our company culture and workplace practices. Apparently, someone has been feeding them information about our internal operations." The room fell silent. Diane felt her heart rate accelerate as several pairs of eyes turned toward her. The implication was clear and poisonous. "Furthermore," Robert continued, "Patterson Group specifically mentioned concerns about our commitment to diversity and inclusion. They've decided to take their business to a firm that better aligns with their corporate values." Carmen's pen stopped moving. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Frank's expression had turned stony. "I want to know how this happened." Robert's voice rose slightly. "I want to know who's been talking to external parties about internal company matters." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Diane realized that everyone was waiting for her to respond, to defend herself against the unspoken charge that she had somehow sabotaged the company. "Are you suggesting that I contacted the Patterson Group?" Diane's voice was steady, but her hands gripped her wheelchair's armrests. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts." Robert's cold blue eyes fixed on her like laser sights. "The Patterson Group cited diversity concerns. You're our newest employee. The timeline is suspicious." "That's completely circumstantial," Frank interjected. "And frankly, it's inappropriate to make accusations without evidence." "I'm not making accusations, Frank. I'm investigating a serious breach of company confidentiality." Robert's tone carried the authority of absolute power. "Miss Foster, do you have any contact with anyone at Patterson Group?" "No." "Have you discussed your experience here with anyone outside the company?" Diane thought about her conversations with Rebecca, her carefully edited phone calls with her father, the research she'd done into employment law. None of that was relevant to Patterson Group, but she could see how Robert might twist any external communication into evidence of disloyalty. "I've spoken with friends and family about my internship in general terms." What kind of general terms? The question felt like a trap. If she admitted to discussing Robert's treatment, he would use it as proof of her treachery. If she denied it, she would be lying in front of witnesses. Normal conversations about starting a new job. Did these normal conversations include complaints about your assignments or treatment? Frank stood abruptly. "This is completely out of line, Robert. You're conducting an interrogation based on pure speculation." "Sit down, Frank. This is my company, and I'll run this meeting however I see fit." "Actually, it's our company, and what you're doing right now could expose us to a massive liability lawsuit." The tension in the room was suffocating. Diane could see other employees exchanging glances, uncertain whether to intervene or remain silent. Carmen had stopped taking notes entirely and was staring at Robert with obvious disgust. "Fine," Robert said, his voice dripping with false reasonableness. "Let's approach this differently. Miss Foster, since you're clearly invested in our company's success, I'm sure you won't mind working closely with me to identify how this information leak occurred." Diane felt her throat constrict. "What does that mean?" "It means you'll be assisting me personally with damage control. Starting immediately, you'll work directly under my supervision to help restore our reputation and secure new clients." His smile was predatory. "Consider it a promotion." The room erupted in quiet murmurs. Tyler looked stricken. Frank's face had turned red with anger. Carmen was typing furiously on her tablet, probably documenting everything. "I'd prefer to continue with my current assignments," Diane said carefully. "I'm afraid that's not an option. This is a crisis situation, and I need all hands on deck. You'll report directly to me until further notice." As the meeting dispersed, employees filed out with troubled expressions. Frank lingered near Diane's workstation, his concern obvious. "This is retaliation," he said quietly. He's punishing you for something you didn't do. Can you prove I didn't do it? Diane asked. Frank was silent for a moment. Can he prove you did? That evening, Diane found herself trapped in Robert's outer office, supposedly helping Beverly organize client files while Robert worked late on damage control. The real purpose was obvious: surveillance and intimidation. Beverly worked with nervous efficiency, stealing glances at Diane every few minutes. I'm sorry about this, she whispered during one of Robert's phone calls. It's not your fault. Isn't it, though? Beverly's voice was barely audible. I've watched him do this to people before. I never said anything. Never stood up to him. Through Robert's open door, they could hear him on yet another phone call with potential clients. His voice smooth and persuasive as he downplayed the Patterson situation. But each call was taking longer, and his frustration was becoming more apparent. Beverly! Robert's voice cracked like a whip. Get me the Morrison account files. And bring Miss Foster in here. I need to discuss her new responsibilities. Diane wheeled into Robert's office, acutely aware that she was now completely alone with him. The space felt oppressive, decorated with expensive art and awards that testified to his success and power. Shut the door, Robert commanded. Diane hesitated. I'd prefer to leave it open. I said shut the door. With no choice, Diane closed the door behind her. Robert stood behind his massive desk, silhouetted against the Denver skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the office. Let's be clear about something, Robert began, his voice dangerously quiet. I know you're responsible for the Patterson situation. I can't prove it yet, but I will. I had nothing to do with Patterson Group. Maybe not directly, but your presence here has created problems. Your attitude, your victim mentality, your constant need for special accommodation. It all adds up to a toxic environment that drives away legitimate business. Diane felt her careful composure beginning to crack. My victim mentality? Don't play innocent. From day one, you've acted like we owe you something special because of your circumstances. You've made people uncomfortable, created unnecessary drama, and now we're paying the price. The only drama has come from you treating me like a second-class employee. Robert's eyes flashed. Second class? You're lucky to be here at all. Do you have any idea how many qualified candidates we turned down to make room for someone like you? Someone like me? Someone who brings nothing but problems and complications. Someone who expects the entire company to revolve around their limitations. The words hit Diane like physical blows. She'd heard variations of these sentiments before, but never delivered with such calculated cruelty. I've never asked for anything special. I've done every assignment you've given me, no matter how irrelevant to my qualifications. And now you're going to do more. You're going to help me fix the mess you've created. Starting tomorrow, you'll be working exclusively on client relations. Making calls, sending emails, representing Crane Dynamics to potential partners. Diane realized the true horror of his plan. He was going to put her in direct contact with clients and prospects, then use any negative responses as evidence of her inadequacy. If potential clients showed any hesitation about working with a company that employed a black woman in a wheelchair, Robert would blame her for driving away business. You can't do this. I can do whatever I want. This is my company, and you work for me. Robert leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to resign. I'd be happy to provide a positive reference letter citing your decision to pursue other opportunities. The offer hung between them like poisoned honey. Diane could end her torment immediately, walk away with her dignity partially intact, and never see Robert Crane again. But accepting his offer would mean admitting defeat, confirming every prejudiced assumption about her capabilities. I'm not resigning. Robert's smile was arctic. Then I guess we'll be working very closely together. I do hope you're up for the challenge. As Diane left his office, she realized that her situation had fundamentally changed. The casual humiliation and petty assignments were over. Now Robert was waging open warfare, using her identity as a weapon against both her and the company. But what Robert didn't understand was that Diane Foster had been fighting battles like this her entire life. And she'd learned that sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to lose. Back in her apartment that night, Diane finally made the phone call she'd been avoiding. Rebecca's voice was warm and concerned as she answered. "Diane, I've been worried about you. Your texts have been so weird lately." "Rebecca, I need to ask you something. Do you know anyone who works at Patterson Group?" "Patterson Group? The big consulting firm? Why? Just answer the question." "Yeah, my cousin Jake works there. Middle management, I think." "Why are you asking?" Diane closed her eyes. The coincidence was too perfect, too convenient. "Has Jake mentioned anything about Crane Dynamics lately?" "Actually, yes. He said they were ending some big contract because of workplace culture issues. Something about discrimination complaints." The pieces clicked into place. Patterson Group hadn't pulled their contract because of anything Diane had done. They'd made their decision based on information from other sources, probably employees who'd witnessed Robert's behavior or clients who'd heard rumors about his management style. But Robert had chosen to blame her anyway, using the situation as justification for escalating his campaign of harassment. He was trapped in his own paranoia, seeing threats and conspiracies where none existed. As Diane prepared for bed, she thought about tomorrow's forced collaboration with Robert. He believed he was cornering her, backing her into a position where she would have no choice but to quit or be fired. He had no idea that he was actually cornering himself. And very soon, he would discover just how dangerous that could be. Tomorrow would bring new humiliations and fresh attempts to break her spirit. But tomorrow would also bring opportunities. Because now Diane knew the truth about Patterson Group, and she was beginning to understand the full scope of Robert's vulnerabilities. The forced proximity he thought would destroy her might actually be the key to his own downfall. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Robert's office as Diane wheeled herself past Beverly's desk for what she now understood would be a day of deliberate humiliation disguised as client relations work. It's day 5. Robert had already prepared a list of potential clients for her to contact, companies he'd specifically chosen because he believed they would respond negatively to her voice and identity. "Good morning, Miss Foster," Robert said with false pleasantness as she entered his office. "Ready for your new responsibilities?" "Yes, sir." Robert handed her a tablet containing contact information and scripts. "Start with these prospects. I want detailed reports on every conversation, including their reactions and any concerns they express about working with our company." As Diane reviewed the list, she noticed something interesting. Several of the companies were direct competitors of Foster Technologies. Robert was unknowingly asking her to cold call businesses that her father either owned significant stakes in or maintained close relationships with. The irony would have been amusing if the situation weren't so deliberately cruel. Her first call was to Pinnacle Software Solutions, a company she knew was partially owned by one of Kenneth's investment funds. The receptionist transferred her to the business development manager, a woman named Jessica who listened politely to Diane's pitch about Crane Dynamics services. "I'm sorry," Jessica said after Diane finished her presentation, "but we've heard some concerning things about Crane Dynamics' workplace culture. We're not interested in partnering with companies that don't align with our values." Robert, who had been listening from his desk, leaned forward with satisfaction. This was exactly the response he'd expected and wanted. "What specific concerns?" Diane asked, genuinely curious. "Word travels fast in the tech community. We've heard about discriminatory practices, hostile work environments, that sort of thing. It's a liability we can't afford to associate with." After ending the call, Diane turned to Robert with the results. His smile was triumphant. "Interesting. They cited workplace culture concerns. The same issue that cost us the Patterson contract." His tone was loaded with accusation. "It seems our reputation problems are widespread." "Or maybe the problems are real," Diane replied quietly. Robert's expression hardened. "Make the next call." As the morning progressed, the pattern repeated itself. Company after company politely declined to work with Crane Dynamics, citing reputation concerns or cultural misalignment. With each rejection, Robert's satisfaction grew, and his treatment of Diane became more openly hostile. Fascinating how these problems started appearing right around the time you joined us, he said after the 5th consecutive rejection. During lunch break, Diane escaped to the building's courtyard, needing fresh air and space to think. She was reviewing her notes when Frank Morrison approached with 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I join you? Please." Frank settled onto the bench beside her wheelchair, his expression troubled. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday's meeting. What Robert did was completely inappropriate. Thank you for speaking up. I should have done more." Frank stared at his coffee. "I should have shut it down entirely." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Frank spoke again. "Can I ask you something personal?" Diane nodded. "Your last name is Foster. Any relation to Foster Technologies?" Diane's heart skipped. "Why do you ask?" "It's probably nothing, but I was reviewing some old files last night. Crane Dynamics tried to secure a partnership with Foster Technologies about 6 months ago. The proposal was rejected pretty decisively." Frank paused. The rejection letter was signed by Kenneth Foster, CEO. "Same last name as yours." Diane felt the weight of the moment. She could deflect, claim coincidence, maintain her carefully constructed independence. Or she could trust Frank with the truth that could change everything. "Kenneth Foster is my father." Frank's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. "Your father is Kenneth Foster? The Kenneth Foster? The billionaire tech mogul?" "Yes." "Jesus Christ." Frank set down his cup with shaking hands. "Does Robert know?" "No. And I'd prefer to keep it that way." Frank stared at her in amazement. "Do you realize what this means? Your father could buy and sell Crane Dynamics 100 times over. He could destroy Robert with a phone call. Which is exactly why I don't want him to know what's happening here." "But why? Why put yourself through this abuse when you could end it instantly?" Diane looked out at the Denver skyline, gathering her thoughts. "When I was 19, I was in a car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light and hit my car head-on. I spent 8 months in rehabilitation, learning to use a wheelchair, rebuilding my life from scratch." Frank listened intently as she continued. "During recovery, I overheard 2 nurses talking about me. They said it was such a shame about the rich girl who'd never have to work anyway because daddy's money would take care of everything. They assumed my disability didn't matter because I had financial security. That's horrible. But it made me realize something important. If I let my father's wealth define my worth or solve my problems, I'd never know what I was truly capable of. I'd always wonder if my successes were real or just purchased." Frank nodded slowly. "So you've been proving yourself on your own terms." "Exactly. I graduated from MIT on merit, not donations. I got this internship through my qualifications, not connections. And if I'm going to succeed in tech, it needs to be because of my abilities, not my family name. But what Robert's doing to you isn't about merit or qualifications. It's pure bigotry. I know. But calling my father would be like admitting that I can't handle the real world without protection. It would confirm every assumption about privileged people who need daddy to fight their battles." As they walked back into the building, Frank was quiet, processing the revelation. Finally, he spoke. "What if there was another way? What if we could expose Robert's behavior without involving your father directly?" "What do you mean?" "I've been documenting everything I've witnessed. Tyler's been keeping records too. Carmen has contacts in employment advocacy groups. We might have enough evidence to file a formal complaint with state authorities." Diane considered this. "That could take months to investigate. And Robert would probably fire me the moment he learned about it. Maybe. Or maybe the investigation itself would force him to back down." That afternoon brought a development that changed everything. As Diane continued her client calls under Robert's watchful supervision, Beverly knocked on the office door with an urgent expression. "Mr. Crane, there's a call for you on line 3. Says it's about the Patterson Group situation." Robert picked up the phone with anticipation. "Robert Crane speaking." Diane couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Robert's expression shift from confidence to confusion to alarm. "What do you mean, investigation? What kind of investigation?" Robert's voice rose. "Based on whose complaint?" The conversation continued for several minutes, with Robert's face growing paler by the moment. Finally, he hung up and sat in stunned silence. "What was that about?" Diane asked. Robert looked at her with something approaching panic. "The Colorado Department of Labor is opening an investigation into workplace discrimination complaints at Crane Dynamics. Someone filed a formal complaint citing hostile work environment and discriminatory practices." Diane felt her stomach drop. Who filed the complaint? They wouldn't say. But the investigator mentioned specific incidents from this week. Detailed descriptions of harassment and retaliation. Robert's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Someone has been very thorough in documenting my interactions with you." The implications were terrifying. If Robert believed she had filed a complaint, his retaliation would be swift and vicious. But if she denied involvement, he might suspect someone else and begin a witch hunt among the staff. "I didn't file any complaint," Diane said truthfully. "Then who did?" Robert stood and began pacing behind his desk. "Someone has been feeding information to state investigators. Someone with detailed knowledge of our internal operations." A knock on the door interrupted his spiral of paranoia. Frank Morrison entered without waiting for permission, his expression grim. "Robert, we need to talk. Now." "Not now, Frank. We've got bigger problems than your hurt feelings about management styles." "This is about those bigger problems." Frank closed the door behind him. "I just got off the phone with 3 more potential clients. They're all declining to work with us, citing the same concerns about workplace culture." Robert whirled on Frank. "How did you know I was having Miss Foster make those calls?" "Because the tech community in Denver is smaller than you think, and word is spreading fast about what's happening here." "What exactly is happening here, Frank?" "According to you." Frank looked directly at Robert with steady eyes. "You're systematically harassing an employee based on her race and disability. You're creating a hostile work environment that's driving away business and attracting government investigation. And you're too blinded by your own prejudices to see that you're destroying the company we built together." The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Robert's face flushed red with anger. "Get out of my office. This isn't over, Robert. The investigation will uncover the truth, whether you cooperate or not." After Frank left, Robert turned his fury on Diane. "I don't know how you did it, but you've poisoned my own business partner against me. You've turned my employees into spies and saboteurs. You've brought government investigators down on my company. I haven't done anything except try to do my job." "Your job?" Robert laughed bitterly. "Your job is to be grateful for the opportunity one gave you. Your job is to know your place and stay in it. Instead, you've caused nothing but problems from the moment you rolled through my door." As Robert's tirade continued, Diane realized that the mask had finally come off completely. The man standing before her wasn't hiding his bigotry behind corporate speak anymore. He was revealing the full depth of his hatred and fear. But he was also revealing his weakness. His paranoia was making him sloppy, causing him to lash out at allies and potential supporters. The investigation Frank had mentioned was real, which meant someone with courage and documentation skills had taken action. As the workday ended, Diane wheeled out of Robert's office knowing that the situation had reached a tipping point. The backstory of her family wealth remained her secret, but other truths were beginning to surface. The battle lines were drawn, and soon everyone would have to choose which side they were on. That evening, as she sat in her apartment reviewing the day's events, Diane's phone rang. Kenneth's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Dad." "Hello, sweetheart. How was your week?" For the first time since starting at Crane Dynamics, Diane considered telling her father everything. The humiliation, the discrimination, the fear that was growing in her chest. One conversation could end her ordeal and destroy Robert Crane completely. Instead, she said, "It's been educational. I'm learning a lot about business." "That's wonderful. Are they treating you well?" The question hung between them, loaded with paternal concern and protective instinct. Diane could hear in his voice that he suspected something was wrong. "I'm handling everything just fine, Dad. I'm proud of you, Diane. Whatever challenges you're facing, I know you'll overcome them." After hanging up, Diane stared at her reflection in the dark window. Tomorrow would bring new confrontations, fresh attempts to break her spirit, and possibly the revelation of whoever had filed the discrimination complaint. But tonight, she felt something she hadn't experienced all week: hope. The truth was beginning to emerge, allies were revealing themselves, and Robert's own paranoia was becoming his greatest enemy. The real battle was just beginning. And for the first time, Diane believed she might actually win. The weekend had provided Diane with much-needed distance from Robert's toxic presence, but Monday morning brought an unexpected development. As she wheeled into the Crane Dynamics lobby, she noticed several employees clustered around the elevator banks, speaking in hushed tones with worried expressions. Tyler intercepted her before she could reach the elevator. "There's been a development. 3 more employees filed discrimination complaints over the weekend." 3 more. Carmen from marketing, 2 developers from the 3rd floor, and apparently someone from accounting. Tyler's young face was flushed with excitement and anxiety. "The state investigators are coming in today to interview staff." As they rode the elevator together, Tyler continued. "Frank's been reaching out to people all weekend. Turns out a lot of employees have witnessed Robert's behavior toward you, and some have experienced similar treatment themselves." "What kind of similar treatment?" "Carmen told me Robert made comments about her age and accent when she first started. One of the developers is gay, and Robert's made several inappropriate remarks about that. The accountant is Muslim, and she says Robert's questioned her commitment to American business practices." Diane felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that she wasn't Robert's only target, that patterns of discrimination were being documented and addressed. Sadness that other good people had suffered under his leadership. The elevator opened to reveal an office in subtle chaos. Employees moved with nervous energy, gathering in small groups to whisper about the investigation. Beverly Walsh looked like she hadn't slept, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her hands shaking as she organized files. "Miss Foster," Beverly called as Diane passed her desk. "Mr. Crane wants to see you immediately." Robert's office felt different this morning. The usual aura of absolute power had been replaced by something more desperate. He stood at his window with his back to the door, his posture rigid with tension. "Close the door," he said without turning around. "I'd prefer to leave it open." Robert spun to face her, his blue eyes wild with barely controlled panic. "I said close the door. We need to discuss your future at this company." Reluctantly, Diane closed the door but positioned her wheelchair near it, ready to leave quickly if necessary. "The investigators will want to interview you," Robert began, his voice artificially calm. "When they do, I trust you'll remember that Crane Dynamics has treated you fairly and professionally." "I'll tell them the truth." "The truth." Robert's laugh was bitter. "The truth is that you've been given opportunities here that most interns only dream of. Direct access to senior management, exposure to high-level client relationships, hands-on experience with crisis management." Diane stared at him in amazement. Even now, facing a government investigation, Robert was reframing his harassment as professional development. "The truth is that you assigned me to file papers and sort mail because you assumed I was incompetent. I assigned you tasks appropriate to your experience level. My experience level includes a computer science degree from MIT and published research in accessibility programming." Robert's mask slipped further. "Your degree doesn't mean anything if you can't function in a real business environment. And clearly you can't, or we wouldn't be dealing with government investigators and lost contracts." A knock on the door interrupted his tirade. Frank Morrison entered without waiting for permission, followed by Carmen Lopez and a woman Diane didn't recognize. "Robert, I'd like you to meet Sandra Chen from the Department of Labor's Civil Rights Division." The woman was in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Ms. Chen." Robert forced his corporate smile back into place. "How can Crane Dynamics assist with your investigation?" "We'll start with individual interviews." I'd like to speak with Ms. Foster first, if that's acceptable. Of course. Miss Foster, please give Ms. Chen your full cooperation. As they left Robert's office, Diane felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in a week, she was surrounded by people who believed her, who understood that what she'd experienced was wrong. The conference room had been converted into a temporary interview space. Sandra Chen settled across from Diane with a digital recorder and a thick folder of documents. Before we begin, I want you to know that this conversation is confidential. Mr. Crane cannot retaliate against you for participating in this investigation, and if he tries, that would constitute additional violations. Over the next hour, Diane recounted every detail of her experience at Crane Dynamics. The mail sorting, the storage closet assignments, the overheard phone conversation, the accusations about the Patterson Group contract. Sandra took detailed notes and asked clarifying questions that demonstrated her experience with discrimination cases. Have you documented any of these incidents? I started keeping notes later in the week, and Tyler Brooks has been tracking everything he's witnessed. Good. Documentation is crucial in these cases. Sandra closed her folder. I have to ask this question directly. Do you have any family or personal connections that Mr. Crane might be unaware of? Sometimes discrimination cases become complicated when other factors are involved. Diane hesitated. This was the moment she'd been dreading and anticipating. My father is Kenneth Foster, CEO of Foster Technologies. Sandra's pen stopped moving. Kenneth Foster, the billionaire? Yes. Does Mr. Crane know about this relationship? No. I've kept it secret because I wanted to succeed on my own merit. Sandra nodded thoughtfully. That's admirable, but it also creates an interesting dynamic. Your father's company attempted to partner with Crane Dynamics earlier this year, correct? Yes. The proposal was rejected. Mr. Crane might view this as relevant to his business losses, even though the timeline doesn't support that theory. Sandra made additional notes. I'll need to interview your father as part of this investigation. Is that necessary? I'm afraid so. If Mr. Crane learns about your family connection during our investigation, he might claim that your father's influence caused his business problems. We need Kenneth Foster's testimony to establish the actual timeline and his decision-making process. After the interview, Diane found herself in the break room with Frank, Carmen, and Tyler. For the first time since starting at Crane Dynamics, she felt like she belonged somewhere. How did it go? Tyler asked. Thorough. She seems to know what she's doing. Carmen poured coffee for everyone and settled into a chair beside Diane. I should have spoken up sooner. When I saw what Robert was doing to you, I should have said something immediately. You're saying something now. That's what matters. It's not enough, Frank said quietly. I've been Robert's business partner for 8 years. I've watched him treat people badly before, but I always convinced myself it was just his management style. What he did to you forced me to see the truth. Tyler leaned forward. What truth? That Robert doesn't see people like Diane as fully human. To him, she's not a brilliant programmer with innovative ideas. She's a diversity hire, a checkbox to fill, a problem to manage. Frank's voice carried the weight of painful recognition. And if I stayed silent about that, I'd be complicit in it. As they talked, Diane felt something she hadn't experienced in years: the warmth of genuine workplace community. These people had risked their jobs and careers to stand up for what was right. They'd chosen courage over comfort, justice over job security. There's something I need to tell you all, Diane said carefully. Something that might change how you see this situation. She explained about her father, about Foster Technologies, about the wealth and power that Robert had no idea existed. Her 3 colleagues listened with growing amazement. Holy shit, Tyler whispered. Your dad could buy this entire building. Language, Carmen scolded automatically, then caught herself. But he's not wrong. Kenneth Foster is one of the most powerful people in tech. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Does this change anything for you? Knowing that you could end all of this with a phone call? No, Diane replied firmly. If anything, It makes me more determined to see this through the right way. Robert's behavior is wrong regardless of who my father is. Other employees shouldn't have to hope their parents are billionaires to get justice. Carmen reached across the table and squeezed Diane's hand. You're remarkable, you know that? Most people in your position would have unleashed their father's lawyers on day one. Most people don't have something to prove the way I do. As the afternoon progressed, the investigators conducted more interviews. Employees emerged from the conference room with expressions ranging from relief to anger to determination. Word spread through the office that the investigation was comprehensive and serious. Robert spent the day locked in his office, making increasingly frantic phone calls to lawyers and business contacts. Through his open door, employees could hear fragments of conversations that revealed his growing desperation. What do you mean reputation management? This is a witch hunt based on frivolous complaints. I don't care what the investigators think they found. These people are lying. Find me someone who can make this go away. Money is no object. By 4 p.m., the investigators had finished their initial interviews and scheduled follow-up sessions for later in the week. Sandra Chen emerged from the conference room with a thick folder of notes and a grim expression. She stopped by Diane's workstation before leaving. We'll be in touch about next steps. In the meantime, document everything. If Mr. Crane's behavior changes in any way, report it immediately. As the investigators left the building, the office fell into a strange quiet. Employees worked at their desks with unusual focus, as if afraid to acknowledge what had just happened. The normal sounds of business continued, but underneath was a tension that everyone could feel. Frank approached Diane as she packed up her laptop. Would you like to grab dinner? I think we all need to decompress after today. That sounds perfect. They met at a small restaurant downtown, away from the corporate environment that had dominated their lives for the past week. Over pasta and wine, the conversation flowed easily for the first time since Diane had started at Crane Dynamics. I keep thinking about what you said earlier, Carmen mused. About proving yourself independently. I respect that so much, but it also makes me sad. Why sad? Because you shouldn't have to prove anything. Your qualifications speak for themselves. The fact that you've had to endure Robert's abuse just to demonstrate your worth is infuriating. Tyler nodded vigorously. You're better than most of our senior developers. You should be leading projects, not sorting mail. Maybe after this investigation, things will change, Frank suggested. If Robert is removed from his position, we could restructure the company with better leadership. Diane felt a flutter of hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future at Crane Dynamics that didn't involve daily humiliation and discrimination. A future where her ideas were valued, her contributions recognized, her presence welcomed. Do you really think that's possible? She asked. I think anything's possible now, Frank replied. The investigation will take time, but the truth is finally coming out. Robert's reign of toxicity is ending. As they walked back to their cars, Carmen pulled Diane aside. I want you to know something. Watching you handle this situation with such grace and dignity has inspired me. I've been dealing with Robert's microaggressions for 5 years, but I never had the courage to speak up until I saw you refuse to be broken. You had the courage all along. You just needed the right moment to use it. Maybe. But that moment came because of you. Driving home through the Denver evening, Diane felt lighter than she had in weeks. The investigation was proceeding, allies had emerged, and for the first time since starting her internship, she felt genuinely connected to her colleagues. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. How was the weekend? Still being mysterious about work. Diane smiled as she typed back. Things are looking up. I'll call you tonight with details. For the first time in a week, she had good news to share. The battle wasn't over, but she was no longer fighting it alone. And that made all the difference. As she pulled into her apartment complex, Diane allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she felt something that had been missing since her first day at Crane Dynamics. Hope for the future and gratitude for the people who had chosen to stand with her. The emotional bonds forged in crisis were often the strongest. And somehow, in the midst of Robert's cruelty and discrimination, she had found something unexpected: a community of people willing to fight for what was right. It was more than she had dared to hope for when this nightmare began. The morning started with an ominous email that appeared in every Crane Dynamics employee's inbox at exactly 8 a.m. The subject line read, "Mandatory all-staff meeting, 9 a.m. conference room A, attendance required." Diane wheeled into the office to find the atmosphere thick with anxiety. Employees clustered in worried groups, speculating about the purpose of the emergency meeting. Tyler met her at the elevator with a grim expression. "This can't be good. Robert's been locked in his office since 6 a.m. making phone calls. Beverly looks like she's about to have a panic attack." As they entered the conference room, Diane noticed several unfamiliar faces in expensive suits seated near the front. Robert stood at the head of the table with an expression of cold determination that sent chills down her spine. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert began as the room filled, "recent events have forced me to make some difficult decisions about the future of this company." Frank Morrison entered late and took a seat near the back, his face pale with concern. Carmen Lopez sat beside Diane, her notebook ready but her hands trembling slightly. "As you know, we've been subjected to a harassment investigation based on frivolous complaints from disgruntled employees." Robert's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute control. "These accusations have damaged our reputation and cost us valuable business relationships." Diane felt her stomach clench. She could sense where this was heading. "Therefore, effective immediately, I'm implementing a restructuring plan designed to restore Crane Dynamics to its former excellence." Robert gestured toward the suited strangers. "These gentlemen represent Titan Management Consulting, specialists in corporate turnaround situations." One of the consultants, a thin man with silver hair and dead eyes, stood to address the room. "After reviewing your company's recent performance and personnel issues, we've identified several areas requiring immediate correction." He opened a tablet and began reading names. "The following employees are being terminated, effective immediately, for performance issues and failure to maintain company standards." Diane's heart pounded as she waited for her name. Carmen Lopez, Tyler Brooks, Diane Foster. The words hit like physical blows. Around the room, shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tyler's face went white. Carmen gripped her pen so hard her knuckles turned pale. "These terminations are based on documented performance deficiencies and behavioral issues that have created a hostile work environment for other employees," the consultant continued. Frank Morrison shot to his feet. "This is retaliation, Robert. Pure and simple. You're firing the people who cooperated with the investigation. This is a performance-based restructuring, Frank. Nothing more." Robert's smile was arctic. "These employees have demonstrated that they're not suited for our corporate culture." "What performance deficiencies?" Tyler's voice cracked with emotion. "I've received excellent reviews for 2 years running." "Your recent conduct has been disruptive and unprofessional," Robert replied smoothly, "including the dissemination of confidential company information to outside parties." The accusation was clearly designed to suggest that Tyler had leaked information to investigators, though everyone in the room knew he'd simply told the truth when interviewed. Carmen stood slowly, her dignity intact despite the devastating blow. "This is illegal retaliation, and you know it." "Actually, it's not." Another consultant, a woman with sharp features and a briefcase full of documents, addressed the room. "Colorado is an at-will employment state. Employers can terminate workers for any reason that doesn't violate federal discrimination laws. Performance issues are perfectly legitimate grounds for dismissal." Diane felt the walls closing in around her. After everything they'd been through, after the investigation and the hope for justice, Robert was simply eliminating his problems through legal but morally reprehensible means. "You have 30 minutes to clear out your personal belongings," Robert announced. "Security will escort you from the building. Your final paychecks will be mailed within 2 weeks." As the meeting dispersed, employees filed out with shell-shocked expressions. Some avoided eye contact with the terminated workers, afraid that showing support might make them the next targets. Others whispered expressions of outrage and disbelief. Frank approached Diane as she sat frozen in her wheelchair. "This is unconscionable. I'm calling my lawyer immediately." "Don't," Diane said quietly. "You'll just make yourself the next target." "I don't care. This has gone beyond business disagreements. This is evil." 30 minutes later, Diane found herself in the parking garage with Tyler and Carmen, cardboard boxes containing their personal belongings balanced precariously on their laps and in their arms. The security guard who'd escorted them out had been apologetic but firm. "I can't believe this is happening," Tyler said, staring at the Crane Dynamics building as if it might offer some explanation for the morning's events. Carmen's face was set in grim lines. "I can believe it. This is exactly what Robert does when he feels threatened. He eliminates the threat." "What do we do now?" Tyler asked. Before anyone could answer, Frank Morrison burst through the garage doors, his face flushed with anger and exertion. "I just quit," he announced breathlessly. "Effective immediately. I told Robert exactly what I thought of his restructuring plan." Diane stared at him in shock. "Frank, you didn't have to do that. You had 8 years invested in that company. 8 years of enabling a monster. 8 years of looking the other way while he destroyed good people." Frank's voice was raw with emotion. "I should have walked out the day he started targeting you." As they stood in the parking garage processing the magnitude of what had just happened, Diane's phone rang. Kenneth's name appeared on the screen. "I can't talk to him right now," she said, declining the call. The phone immediately rang again. "You should answer," Carmen suggested gently. He might have heard something about the investigation. Reluctantly, Diane accepted the call. "Hi, Dad." "Diane, sweetheart, I just received a very interesting phone call from the Colorado Department of Labor. Something about an investigation involving your workplace." Diane closed her eyes. The moment she'd been dreading had finally arrived. "Dad, I can explain. Are you somewhere safe? Can you talk freely? I'm in a parking garage with some colleagues. We were just fired." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "You were fired? From the internship?" Kenneth's voice was dangerously quiet. "It's a long story. Then you'd better start telling it. Right now." For the next 20 minutes, standing in the concrete chill of the parking garage, Diane recounted everything. Robert's discrimination, the mail sorting, the accusations about Patterson Group, the investigation, and finally the morning's terminations. Kenneth listened without interruption, but Diane could hear his breathing becoming deeper and more controlled as the story progressed. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Kenneth said when she finished. "This man has been systematically harassing you for 2 weeks because of your race and disability. He's falsely accused you of sabotaging his business. And now he's fired you in retaliation for cooperating with a civil rights investigation." "Yes. And you didn't tell me because you wanted to handle it yourself." "I wanted to prove I could succeed without your help." Another long silence. "Diane, I admire your independence more than you know. But there's a difference between proving yourself professionally and enduring criminal harassment in silence." "It's not criminal." "It absolutely is criminal. What you've described constitutes workplace harassment, retaliation, and probably conspiracy to deprive you of civil rights. This Robert Crane has committed federal crimes." Frank stepped closer to the phone. "Mr. Foster? This is Frank Morrison, former business partner of Robert Crane. Your daughter is the most professional, capable person I've ever worked with. What happened to her is an absolute disgrace. Mr. Morrison, thank you for standing up for my daughter. I won't forget that." Tyler and Carmen exchanged glances as Kenneth continued. "Diane, I want you to come home immediately. We're going to discuss this situation properly. Dad, please don't do anything drastic. The investigation is still ongoing. Justice might still." "Justice." Kenneth's laugh was bitter. "Sweetheart, this man just fired you for cooperating with investigators. He's demonstrated that he's willing to break federal law to protect his prejudices. The time for quiet justice is over." As Diane hung up the phone, She felt the last vestiges of her carefully constructed independence crumbling. She tried to fight Robert on equal terms, using merit and perseverance and legal channels. But he'd changed the rules, escalated beyond anything she could counter with professional excellence alone. "What's your father going to do?" Carmen asked quietly. "I don't know. But knowing my dad, Robert Crane just made the worst mistake of his life." Frank checked his phone and swore softly. "I'm getting calls from business contacts. Word is already spreading about what happened here today. The tech community doesn't like retaliation against whistleblowers." Tyler looked up from his own phone. "The investigator wants to meet with all of us tomorrow. Says the terminations actually strengthen the case for retaliation." As they prepared to leave the parking garage, each heading toward an uncertain future, Diane felt the full weight of the morning's betrayal. She'd allowed herself to hope, to believe that truth and justice would prevail through proper channels. She'd formed bonds with colleagues who'd stood up for what was right. And Robert had destroyed it all with 3 names on a termination list. The fragile community they'd built over shared meals and mutual support had been shattered by the brutal reality of corporate power. The investigation that had promised justice now felt inadequate against an opponent willing to break laws and destroy lives. But as devastating as the morning had been, Diane realized that Robert had also made a critical error. In his desperation to eliminate the threat she represented, he'd forced her into a corner where her only option was to fight back with every resource at her disposal, including the one resource he knew nothing about. As she drove home through Denver's afternoon traffic, Diane's phone buzzed with text messages from Rebecca, from MIT classmates, from family friends who'd somehow heard about the situation. Word was spreading beyond Colorado, beyond the immediate business community. Robert Crane thought he'd won by eliminating his accusers. But he'd actually just declared war on one of the most powerful families in American business. And he didn't even know it yet. That evening, as Diane sat in her apartment staring at the cardboard box containing her few personal items from Crane Dynamics, she made a decision that would have seemed impossible 2 weeks ago. She was done proving herself quietly. Done enduring abuse for the sake of independence. Done believing that merit alone could overcome systematic prejudice. Tomorrow, she would drive to her father's estate and tell him everything. And then, together, they would show Robert Crane exactly what happened when you underestimated a foster. The shatter point had been reached. Everything that came next would be different. Everything. The drive to Kenneth Foster's estate in the foothills outside Denver felt like a funeral procession. Diane had barely slept, her mind cycling through the wreckage of the previous day. Every mile brought her closer to a conversation that would change everything, not just for her, but for Robert Crane and everyone caught in the aftermath. The Foster estate sat on 200 acres of pristine Colorado landscape, a testament to wealth built through intelligence and integrity rather than inherited privilege. Kenneth had designed the house himself, modern but warm, powerful but welcoming. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Rocky Mountains, and the accessible design throughout reflected his consideration for his daughter's needs. Kenneth met her at the front door, his face a mask of controlled fury that Diane had rarely seen. At 48, he remained an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with the quiet confidence of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. But his warm brown eyes, so like Diane's own, showed the pain of a father who discovered his daughter's suffering. "Come in, sweetheart. We have a lot to discuss." They settled in Kenneth's study, a room lined with books and awards that told the story of his rise from a struggling graduate student to one of America's most influential tech leaders. Diane had always found this room comforting, but today it felt like a war room. "Before we talk about what I'm going to do to Robert Crane," Kenneth began quietly, "I need you to understand something. You were right to want to prove yourself independently. Your strength and determination are remarkable, and I'm proud of how you handled an impossible situation. But there's a difference between earning respect through merit and allowing criminals to destroy you for their entertainment." Kenneth's voice hardened. What that man did to you wasn't just workplace harassment. It was a systematic campaign to break your spirit based on hatred and ignorance. Diane stared out at the mountains, processing the reality that her father now knew everything. "What are you going to do?" Kenneth pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. "I've been making calls since yesterday evening. 23 business leaders, 6 state officials, 4 federal regulators, and 2 senators. Robert Crane's life as he knows it ended the moment he fired you. Dad, please think about this. If you destroy him, people will say I couldn't handle the business world without Daddy's help. Sweetheart, those people are wrong. You handled 2 weeks of systematic abuse with grace and dignity that most adults couldn't muster. You built alliances with colleagues who risked their careers to support you. You cooperated with investigators and tried to solve the problem through proper channels. Kenneth leaned forward intensely. What you couldn't handle was a sociopathic criminal who chose to break federal law rather than treat you with basic human decency. As they talked, Kenneth's assistant knocked on the study door. Sir, Frank Morrison is here to see you. Frank entered looking haggard but determined. He'd clearly spent a sleepless night processing his decision to abandon 8 years of work and investment. Mr. Foster, thank you for seeing me. I wanted to apologize personally for not stopping Robert's behavior sooner. Kenneth studied Frank with the analytical gaze that had served him well in countless business negotiations. Mr. Morrison, my daughter speaks very highly of you. She says you sacrificed your partnership to stand up for what's right. I should have done it sooner. I should have done it the first day. Perhaps. But you did it when it mattered most. That shows character. Kenneth gestured for Frank to sit. I understand you have 8 years and significant capital invested in Crane Dynamics. I walked away from all of it yesterday. What if I told you that investment doesn't have to be lost? Frank looked confused. I don't understand. Kenneth smiled for the first time since Diane's arrival. By tomorrow evening, Crane Dynamics will either be under new management or permanently closed. If Robert chooses to fight, I'll buy the company outright and install leadership that understands how to treat employees with dignity. Your investment and position could be restored under proper management. You can do that. Mr. Morrison, Crane Dynamics' annual revenue is approximately $15 million. I generated that much profit last Tuesday. Kenneth's tone was matter-of-fact rather than boastful. Robert Crane built a successful company, but he made the mistake of targeting my daughter. That company now belongs to me. As if summoned by cosmic timing, Kenneth's phone rang. The caller ID showed Sandra Chen, Department of Labor. Ms. Chen, thank you for calling. I understand you've been investigating my daughter's workplace. Diane could hear Sandra's voice through the phone speaker. Mr. Foster, I wanted to inform you that we're escalating this case to federal level. The terminations yesterday constitute clear retaliation, which is a federal crime. We're coordinating with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Excellent. What do you need from me? Your testimony about the Foster Technologies partnership proposal. Mr. Crane is claiming that his business losses are connected to your daughter's presence at his company. Kenneth's laugh was cold. Ms. Chen, I rejected Robert Crane's partnership proposal 6 months ago because it was poorly written and demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of our business model. I had no idea he even employed my daughter until yesterday. That's what we suspected. Your testimony will establish that his business problems preceded her employment and had nothing to do with her presence. After ending the call, Kenneth turned to Frank with renewed intensity. Here's what's going to happen. In approximately 1 hour, I'm going to call Robert Crane directly. I'm going to explain exactly who I am, what I know about his behavior, and what consequences he's facing. And then I'm going to offer him a choice. He can resign immediately, issue a public apology to my daughter and the other employees he's harassed, and accept a permanent ban from working in Colorado's tech industry. In exchange, I won't pursue criminal charges or civil litigation that would leave him financially ruined. Frank stared at Kenneth with growing amazement. What if he refuses? Then I destroy him completely. His company, his reputation, his future career prospects, everything. Kenneth's voice carried the quiet authority of absolute power. I'll buy Crane Dynamics out from under him, fire him publicly, and ensure that every business leader in America knows exactly what kind of person he is. Diane felt a mixture of relief and concern. Dad, that level of retaliation might seem excessive to outsiders. Excessive? Kenneth stood and walked to his wall of awards and recognition plaques. Sweetheart, let me tell you about excessive. Excessive is spending 2 weeks systematically humiliating a brilliant young woman because she doesn't match your bigoted expectations. Excessive is falsely accusing her of corporate sabotage. Excessive is firing employees for cooperating with civil rights investigators. He turned back to face them. What I'm offering Robert Crane is mercy. More mercy than he showed you, and infinitely more than he deserves. 20 minutes later, Kenneth placed the call that would change everything. He activated the speaker so Diane and Frank could hear both sides of the conversation. Robert Crane speaking. Mr. Crane, this is Kenneth Foster. A pause. Kenneth Foster of Foster Technologies? That's correct. I believe you've been employing my daughter. The silence stretched so long that Diane wondered if Robert had hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Your daughter, Diane Foster. The young woman you've been systematically harassing for 2 weeks because of her race and disability. I don't know what you've been told, but... Mr. Crane, I know exactly what happened. Every email assignment, every humiliating task, every false accusation. I know about the mail sorting, the storage closets, the accusations about Patterson Group. I know about yesterday's illegal terminations. Robert's breathing was audible through the phone. Mr. Foster, there's been a misunderstanding. Your daughter's termination was based on performance issues. Stop talking. Kenneth's voice cut like a blade. You have one chance to end this without complete destruction. Are you listening? Yes. You will resign as CEO of Crane Dynamics, effective immediately. You will issue a public statement acknowledging that you engaged in discriminatory practices against my daughter and other employees. You will personally apologize to each person you've harmed. And you will accept a permanent ban from working in Colorado's tech industry. That's impossible. This is my company. I built it from nothing. Actually, it's my company now. As of 30 minutes ago, I purchased controlling interest from your primary investors. They were surprisingly eager to sell once I explained your legal exposure. Another long silence. You're lying. Check your email, Mr. Crane. The purchase documents were sent to your corporate attorney 20 minutes ago. Diane watched her father during the call, amazed by his calm precision. This wasn't emotional revenge. It was surgical justice delivered with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades mastering complex business operations. If you refuse my offer, Kenneth continued, here's what happens next. Criminal charges for civil rights violations and retaliation. Civil lawsuits that will take everything you own. A coordinated campaign to ensure every business leader in America knows exactly what kind of person you are. Your career will be over, your reputation destroyed, your financial future ruined. This is blackmail. No, Mr. Crane. This is justice. You had choices every day for 2 weeks. You could have treated my daughter with dignity. You could have recognized her qualifications. You could have apologized when your behavior was questioned. Instead, you chose cruelty and escalation at every turn. Robert's voice cracked. What about my employees? What about the people who depend on this company? The good employees will be retained under new management. The people who participated in or enabled your harassment will be terminated. Frank Morrison, whom you forced to quit yesterday, will be offered a senior leadership position. Frank's eyes widened in shock. You have exactly 1 hour to decide, Kenneth concluded. Accept my terms, or face the full consequences of your actions. Choose wisely, Mr. Crane. It's the last business decision you'll ever make. After hanging up, Kenneth turned to his daughter and Frank with satisfaction. And now we wait. Diane felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that her ordeal was ending, gratitude for her father's protection, but also sadness that it had come to this level of confrontation. Do you think he'll accept? Frank asked. He'll accept, Kenneth replied confidently. Robert Crane is fundamentally a coward. When faced with real consequences for his actions, bullies always choose self-preservation over principle. As they waited for Robert's response, Diane realized that her choice had been made days ago when she first documented Tyler's observations. She'd chosen to fight rather than submit, to seek justice rather than accept abuse. Everything that followed was simply the logical conclusion of that initial decision. The phone rang exactly 58 minutes after Kenneth's ultimatum. Robert's voice was defeated, hollow. "I accept your terms." "Excellent. You'll have the resignation letter on my desk within 2 hours. The public statement will be released this afternoon." "And Mr. Crane?" "Yes. If you ever even think about retaliating against my daughter or anyone who supported her, I will make your current situation look like mercy. Do we understand each other?" "Yes." The line went dead. In the study's sudden silence, Diane felt the weight of 2 weeks of torment finally lifting from her shoulders. Justice had been served. But more importantly, the choice to fight for what was right had been vindicated. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. Tonight, for the first time in weeks, Diane could rest knowing that good people had triumphed over evil, and that her father's love had been the force that made victory possible. The choice had been made. The reckoning was complete. 3 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of what had once been Robert Crane's corner office, now transformed into a bright, welcoming space that reflected the new leadership at Foster Dynamics. Diane wheeled herself past the reception desk where Beverly Walsh greeted employees with genuine warmth instead of nervous anxiety. "Good morning, Diane. The development team is ready for your presentation." "Thank you, Beverly. How are you settling into the operations manager role?" Beverly's smile was radiant. "Better than I ever imagined possible. It's amazing what people can accomplish when they're not afraid of their boss." The transformation of the company had been remarkable. Within a week of Robert's resignation, Kenneth had restructured the organization with Frank Morrison as CEO and Diane as Chief Technology Officer. The toxic culture that had dominated under Robert's leadership evaporated as employees discovered they could speak freely, contribute ideas, and be valued for their actual capabilities. Tyler Brooks, now a senior developer, met Diane at the elevator with barely contained excitement. "The accessibility software project is testing even better than we projected. 3 major clients want to license the technology." "Excellent. How's the team dynamic?" "Like night and day compared to before. People actually want to come to work now." As they walked toward the conference room, Diane reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Robert's public resignation statement had sent shockwaves through Denver's business community. His admission of discriminatory practices and personal apology to affected employees had been front-page news in the Colorado Tech Journal. The federal investigation had concluded with criminal charges for retaliation, resulting in probation and community service rather than prison time, thanks largely to Kenneth's testimony advocating for mercy. The conference room was packed with employees eager to see Diane's presentation on the new accessibility programming initiative. Carmen Lopez, now head of marketing, had prepared promotional materials that highlighted both the technical innovation and the social impact of making technology more inclusive. "Good morning, everyone," Diane began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd found her place in the world. 3 months ago, I started here as an intern sorting mail and organizing storage closets. Today, I want to show you how we're going to revolutionize accessibility in software design." Laughter rippled through the room, but it was warm laughter of shared triumph rather than mockery. Everyone present had witnessed or heard about Robert's treatment of Diane, and her rise to leadership felt like justice for all of them. Her presentation outlined a comprehensive accessibility framework that would become the company's signature innovation. The technology would allow disabled users to interact with software in ways previously impossible, opening up new markets while making the digital world more inclusive. The Foster Accessibility Framework will be open source, Diane announced to surprised murmurs. "We're not just trying to corner a market. We're trying to change the world." Frank Morrison, watching from the back of the room, nodded with satisfaction. Under his leadership, the company had not only recovered from the Robert Crane scandal, but had emerged as a leader in ethical business practices and technological innovation. After the presentation, Diane found herself in her office, the same space where Robert had once trapped her for interrogation and humiliation. She'd completely redesigned it, removing the intimidating furniture and replacing it with collaborative workspaces and assistive technology demonstrations. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Kenneth Foster entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the proud expression of a father whose daughter had exceeded every expectation. "How did the presentation go?" "Better than I hoped. The team is excited about the impact we can have." Kenneth settled into a chair across from her desk. "I have some news about Robert Crane." Diane looked up from her computer. In the months since his resignation, Robert had largely disappeared from public view. She'd heard rumors about him working as a consultant for a small firm in Arizona, far from the Colorado tech scene he'd once dominated. "He's requested a meeting with you." "What?" Diane's hands stilled on her keyboard. "His lawyer contacted our legal team yesterday. Robert wants to apologize to you personally. Face to face." Diane felt a complex mixture of emotions. After everything that happened, why now? According to his lawyer, the community service has involved working with disability advocacy groups. Apparently, he's been forced to confront the impact of his prejudices in ways that theoretical sensitivity training never accomplished. "Do you think he's genuinely changed?" Kenneth considered the question carefully. "I think people can change when they face real consequences for their actions. Whether Robert has actually learned empathy or is simply trying to rehabilitate his reputation, I can't say. But the choice is yours." 2 days later, Diane found herself in a neutral conference room at a downtown law office, waiting to face the man who had made her life miserable for 2 terrifying weeks. When Robert entered, she was shocked by his appearance. The arrogant CEO who had once dominated every room had been replaced by a subdued man who seemed to have aged years in just a few months. Robert's expensive suits had been replaced by simple business attire. His silver hair was less perfectly styled, and his cold blue eyes now held something she'd never seen before: genuine remorse. "Miss Foster," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Mr. Crane." Robert took a seat across from her, maintaining respectful distance. "I owe you an apology that's long overdue. What I did to you was inexcusable. It was cruel, illegal, and motivated by prejudices that I'm ashamed to admit I held." Diane listened without interruption as Robert continued. "I spent 8 weeks working with disability advocacy groups as part of my community service. I learned about the barriers that people face every day, barriers that I actively created for you. I learned about the strength and determination it takes to succeed despite those barriers, strength that you demonstrated every day while I was tearing you down. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserved to hear it 3 months ago. Because I was too proud and too ignorant to see what I was doing to another human being." Robert's voice cracked slightly. "And because I hope someday you might be able to forgive me, even though I don't deserve it." The apology hung between them in the conference room's quiet space. Diane studied Robert's face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. Instead, she saw something that looked like genuine transformation. "I can't speak for Tyler and Carmen and the others you hurt," Diane said finally. "But I can speak for myself. I forgive you, Mr. Crane. Not because you've earned it, but because carrying anger isn't serving my future." Robert's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. That's more grace than I deserve." "Maybe. But grace isn't about what people deserve. It's about what kind of person you choose to be." As they prepared to leave, Robert paused at the door. "I heard about the accessibility framework you're developing. It sounds like it will help a lot of people." "That's the plan. I'm glad. The world needs more people like you making technology decisions." 6 months later, on a warm July morning, Diane wheeled herself across the stage at the Colorado Convention Center to accept the State Technology Innovation Award on behalf of Foster Dynamics. The accessibility framework had been adopted by 12 major software companies and was being implemented in schools and businesses across the country. In the audience, she could see Kenneth beaming with pride, Frank applauding enthusiastically, and Carmen, Tyler, and Beverly cheering from the front row. Even Sandra Chen from the Department of Labor was there, having become a friend and advocate for workplace equality initiatives. As Diane accepted the award, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain of those first 2 weeks at Crane Dynamics felt like a lifetime ago, but the lessons learned remained vivid. She discovered that sometimes proving yourself required accepting help. She'd learned that real strength came not from enduring abuse in silence, but from standing up for what was right. And she'd found that the bonds forged in adversity could become the foundation for extraordinary achievements. This award belongs to everyone who refuses to accept discrimination as normal, Diane said into the microphone. It belongs to the colleagues who speak up when they witness injustice. It belongs to the investigators and advocates who ensure that laws protecting workers actually get enforced. And it belongs to the family members who provide support while respecting our independence. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, as the Foster Dynamics team celebrated at a nearby restaurant, Frank raised his glass for a toast. To Diane Foster, who turned the worst workplace situation any of us had ever witnessed into the catalyst for building something extraordinary. To second chances, Carmen added. For all of us. To justice, Tyler contributed. Even when it takes longer than we hope. To love conquering hate, Kenneth said quietly. Always. As the evening wound down, Diane found herself on the restaurant's accessible patio, looking out at the Denver skyline. The city lights twinkled below like promises of future possibilities. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Saw the award ceremony on the news. So proud of you. Remember when you thought this internship was going to be boring? Diane smiled as she typed back. Turns out it was educational in ways I never expected. Another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. Congratulations on your award. You're changing the world. R. Crane. For a moment, Diane stared at the message. Then she typed a simple response. Thank you. Keep doing the good work. As she prepared to leave the restaurant, Diane reflected on how completely her life had changed since that first terrifying day at Crane Dynamics. The scared intern who had gripped her wheelchair handles while Robert's voice cut through the boardroom like a blade was gone, replaced by a confident leader who was building technology to help others overcome the barriers she'd faced. The little girl who had been told by nurses that daddy's money would take care of everything had grown into a woman who'd proven her worth through innovation, courage, and compassion. And the daughter who had been afraid to tell her father about workplace abuse had learned that accepting love and support didn't diminish her strength, it amplified it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make technology more accessible and workplaces more equitable. But tonight, surrounded by the people who had stood with her through the darkness, Diane felt something she'd been seeking her entire adult life. The deep satisfaction of knowing she belonged exactly where she was, not because of her family's wealth or in spite of her disability, but because of the unique contributions only she could make. Love had triumphed over hate. Justice had conquered prejudice. And a young woman who had started her career sorting mail in a basement storage room was now changing the world, one line of code at a time. It was exactly the ending she deserved. 1 year later, the first annual Foster Dynamics Inclusion Summit brought together over 500 business leaders, disability advocates, and technology innovators from across North America. As Diane opened the conference in the same Denver Convention Center where she'd received her award, she reflected on how completely the landscape had changed. 12 months ago, the Foster Accessibility Framework was just an idea born from necessity, she told a packed auditorium. Today, it's been implemented by 47 companies, integrated into 6 major universities, and has improved digital access for over 2 million users worldwide. In the audience, she spotted familiar faces from her journey. Tyler Brooks now led the accessibility development team and had been promoted to Director of Inclusive Technology. His innovative work on voice recognition interfaces had earned him recognition as one of Colorado's 30 under 30 tech leaders. Carmen Lopez had become Chief Marketing Officer and had spearheaded the company's transformation into a certified B Corporation, balancing profit with social impact. Her marketing campaigns highlighting real stories of accessibility challenges had won 3 industry awards and changed how tech companies talked about inclusion. Beverly Walsh, now Operations Manager, had completed her MBA and become a sought-after speaker on workplace culture transformation. Her presentation on From Complicity to Leadership had become a cornerstone of corporate training programs addressing discrimination and bystander intervention. The federal investigation had concluded with Robert Crane pleading guilty to retaliation charges. His sentence included 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service with disability advocacy organizations, and a substantial fine that was donated to accessibility research. The Department of Labor had used the case as a model for prosecuting workplace discrimination, leading to 17 similar investigations across the country. Foster Dynamics had not only recovered financially but had become one of Colorado's fastest-growing companies. The original investors who had sold their stakes to Kenneth at a premium now watched enviously as the company's value had tripled under ethical leadership. 3 major tech giants had attempted to acquire the company, but Kenneth and the board had unanimously voted to remain independent, prioritizing mission over maximum profit. During a break in the summit, Diane was approached by a woman she didn't immediately recognize. The stranger was well-dressed, professional, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. "Ms. Foster? I'm Dr. Rebecca Martinez. I'm the new director of the Colorado Center for Workplace Equity. Nice to meet you. How can I help?" "I wanted to thank you personally. The center was created with funding from the settlement of your case, and we've already helped 63 workers file discrimination complaints. Your courage to speak up created a ripple effect that's still spreading." As the summit continued, Diane learned about other unexpected impacts of her story. 3 universities had created scholarships for disabled students pursuing technology degrees. The Diane Foster Protocol had been adopted by 12 companies as a framework for handling discrimination complaints. And a documentary about workplace accessibility was in production, with proceeds funding advocacy organizations. During lunch, Diane received a text from an unknown number, watching the summit livestream. "Incredible work you're doing. Thank you for showing me what real leadership looks like." She smiled and typed back, "Keep growing, Robert. The world needs people who learn from their mistakes." It had been 6 months since their last communication. Robert Crane had completed his community service and had quietly taken a position with a non-profit organization providing technology training to disabled veterans. His social media presence, once filled with corporate branding and self-promotion, now featured simple posts about accessibility awareness and volunteer opportunities. The afternoon sessions included breakout groups where attendees shared their own experiences with workplace discrimination and brainstormed solutions. Diane moved between rooms, listening to stories that ranged from heartbreaking to inspiring. A young man with autism described how his company's new inclusive hiring practices had given him opportunities he'd never imagined. A veteran with PTSD explained how remote work accommodations had allowed her to return to her technology career. As the summit concluded, Frank Morrison took the stage for closing remarks. Under his leadership, Foster Dynamics had become a case study in ethical transformation, featured in Harvard Business School curricula and management textbooks. "1 year ago, our company was defined by the worst impulses of its leadership," Frank said. "Today, we're defined by the best impulses of our community." That transformation happened because one person refused to accept injustice as normal, and others chose to stand with her. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. That evening, at the summit's closing reception, Kenneth Foster found himself in conversation with Sandra Chen, who had been promoted to Regional Director of Civil Rights Enforcement. "Your daughter has changed more than just one company," Sandra observed. "The legal precedents from this case have strengthened discrimination protections nationwide." "She's always been remarkable," Kenneth replied. "I just provided the resources. The courage was all hers." As the reception wound down, Diane stepped outside onto the convention center's accessible terrace. The Denver skyline glowed in the sunset, and the Rocky Mountains stood majestically in the distance. She thought about the scared young woman who had wheeled into Crane Dynamics just 1 year ago, hoping to prove herself through quiet excellence. That woman had been strong, but she believed strength meant enduring abuse alone. Now Diane understood that real strength came from building communities, accepting support, and using your position to lift others up. Her phone buzzed with messages from around the world. A developer in Tokyo thanked her for accessibility guidelines that had helped him create inclusive gaming software. A startup founder in Lagos credited the Foster framework with making her educational app usable by students with visual impairments. A rehabilitation center in Toronto reported that new accessibility features had improved their patients' technology training outcomes. The ripple effects continued to spread, touching lives she would never meet but whose struggles she understood intimately. As Diane prepared to leave, she was approached by a young black woman in a wheelchair, probably in her early 20s, with bright eyes and a nervous smile. "Ms. Foster? I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you. I start my internship at a tech company next week, and I'm terrified. But knowing what you went through and how you handled it, it gives me courage." Diane smiled warmly. "What's your name?" "Angela. Angela Washington. I just graduated from Stanford with a computer science degree." "Angela, let me give you some advice. You don't have to prove you belong anywhere. You already belong. Your education, your skills, your perspective, they're all valuable. And if anyone tries to make you feel otherwise, don't suffer in silence. There are people who will stand with you." "Thank you. That means everything." As Angela wheeled away, Diane felt the deep satisfaction of knowing her story had become bigger than her personal experience. It had become a roadmap for others facing similar challenges, proof that justice was possible and that standing up for what's right could create lasting change. The night air was crisp with autumn promise as Diane made her way to her car. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, expansion plans for the accessibility framework, speaking engagements at 3 universities, and a congressional hearing on disability rights in technology. But tonight, she felt complete. The journey that had begun with humiliation and discrimination had transformed into purpose and impact. The little girl who had worried that she would never be seen for who she truly was had become a woman whose authentic self was changing the world. Love had indeed conquered hate. Justice had triumphed over prejudice. And sometimes, when you refuse to be broken by the worst in people, you discovered the best in yourself and others. The story that had started with 3 devastating words, "Well, what charity case did they send us now?" had become a testament to the power of resilience, community, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves dignity and respect. In boardrooms and classrooms, in congressional hearings and coffee shop conversations, people now spoke about the Foster Standard, the expectation that workplaces should not just tolerate diversity but actively create environments where everyone could thrive. It was a legacy worth fighting for. And the fight, Diane knew, was just beginning. You don't have to be a billionaire's daughter to demand dignity and respect. You just have to be brave enough to believe you deserve it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.